The lamp is still on. It is past midnight, and the house is quiet in the way that only feels loud when you are the only one still awake. Everyone else has settled into their rest, into their ordinary rhythms, into the predictable comfort of a day that ended the way it was supposed to end. But not you. You are sitting in that chair again, or lying on that bed with your eyes open, or standing at a window you have looked out of 100 times without really seeing anything. There is something inside you that will not let you close. Something that keeps circling back to the same questions, the same unfinished feelings, the same sense that you are standing at the edge of something enormous that you cannot yet name. You have been here before, not just tonight. You have been in this exact place, in this exact stillness, more times than you can count. And every time, you told yourself that tomorrow would feel different, that the weight would lift, that something would shift and the fog would clear, and you would finally understand what all of this has been for. But morning came, and you got up, and you did what you were supposed to do, and you carried it all again, and you are still carrying it now. Beloved and chosen one, I need you to hear what I am about to say, not with your mind first, but with that deep, quiet place inside you that has never stopped believing, even when every other part of you was exhausted. That place is the reason you are here tonight. That place has been preserving something in you that the world could not touch, and that difficulty could not destroy. And tonight, that place is about to be addressed directly. You are not an ordinary person going through an ordinary season. You may have been told that you are too sensitive. You may have been told that you expect too much, that you are too intense, that you feel things too deeply for your own good. But I want you to understand something that those voices never told you. The very things they criticized in you are the exact marks of someone who was made for more. The depth they called a weakness is the well from which your purpose will draw. The sensitivity they mocked is the antenna through which heaven speaks to you. You were not made wrong. You were made different, and different in the hands of God is not a disadvantage. It is a design. There are signs that only chosen ones recognize, and if you have been walking with any of these in your life, I need you to pay close attention. The first sign is that your dreams have become clearer, more layered, more vivid than they used to be. Not just ordinary sleep experiences, but something that feels like instruction, like a message arriving in a language your waking mind cannot fully translate, but your spirit understands completely. The second sign is a persistent frustration that you cannot fully explain to anyone around you. Not sadness, not depression, but a holy restlessness. A sense that the life you are living, as decent as it may be, is not yet the fullness of what you were meant to carry. The third sign is that certain people and certain places have begun to feel wrong in a way they never used to. Like a shoe that once fit but now pinches. You have not changed your values, but you are being stretched beyond the container that used to hold you. The fourth sign is that the same message keeps finding you from different directions. A word from a stranger, a line in a song, a passage that falls open at the right page, and it keeps saying the same thing in different voices. The fifth sign is a quiet, unshakable knowing that you are being prepared for something. You cannot prove it. You cannot explain it to someone who has not felt it. But it sits in your chest like a certainty, and no amount of delay has been able to fully silence it. If you recognize even two of those signs, beloved, you are not imagining things. You are not being dramatic. You are not falling apart. You are waking up. And there is a profound difference between those two things. Falling apart is losing what you had. Waking up is discovering what was always there, waiting for you to be ready enough to receive it. God is not confused about your situation. He is not scrambling to catch up with the mess that life has made. He is not surprised by the doors that closed, by the relationships that ended, by the dreams that went quiet. He was in every one of those moments, not causing the pain, but composing something through it, transforming the architecture of your circumstances from the inside out, rearranging what you cannot see so that what is coming will have somewhere solid to land. You are an earth angel. You are a carrier of something this world needs and cannot manufacture on its own. You were placed here, in this generation, in this body, in this exact story, not by accident and not by chance, but by the deliberate, careful, sovereign hand of a God who does not make mistakes. Heaven has paused the noise around you tonight to deliver this message directly to the part of you that is still awake, still watching, still holding on with both hands, even when it does not know what it is holding on for. You have not been waiting for this moment. This moment has been waiting for you. There is something that happens in a long season of waiting that nobody talks about honestly. People will tell you to stay strong. They will tell you to keep the faith. They will hand you scriptures about patience, endurance, and the goodness of God. And all of those things are true, every single one of them, but they do not always reach the part of you that is quietly breaking. Because what you need in those moments is not another reminder to be stronger. What you need is for someone to sit down beside you and say, I see exactly what this has been. I see what it has cost you. I see what you have been carrying in silence. And I see you. So before we go any further tonight, that is exactly what I want to do. I want to name what you have been feeling, not to pull you deeper into it, but because there is a strange and powerful healing that happens when someone finally puts language to a pain you have been living inside of without a name for it. When the feeling finally gets a name, it loses some of its grip, and you gain some of your ground back. There are 4 signs that people in a genuine season of waiting will recognize, and I am going to name them slowly, because each one deserves to be heard. The first is a sudden wave of sadness about the past that arrives without warning and without an obvious trigger. You could be in the middle of a completely ordinary moment, washing dishes, driving a familiar road, sitting in a meeting, and something rises up from somewhere deep inside you. It is not quite grief, but it is close to grief. It is the feeling of looking back at a version of your life that had more hope in it, a version of you that had not yet learned how much waiting costs. And you feel the distance between that person and who you are now, and the distance feels enormous. You are not depressed, you are not losing your faith, you are mourning. And mourning is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign that what you lost or what you set aside actually mattered. It was real, and you are real for feeling the weight of it. The second sign is that familiar places and familiar people have started to feel heavy in a way that is difficult to explain. Places that used to bring you comfort now feel slightly off, like a frequency that no longer matches yours. People you have known for years suddenly feel distant, even when they are standing right next to you. You are not becoming cold. You are not becoming arrogant. You are not becoming someone who thinks they are better than the people around them. What is happening is that you are being moved. Not physically, not yet, but spiritually and internally, you are being repositioned. And repositioning always creates a temporary distance between where you were and where you are going. The discomfort of that distance is not punishment. It is movement. The third sign is a recurring dream or a recurring image of an unopened door. It may not always be a literal door in your sleep. Sometimes it is a feeling in your waking hours of standing just outside something, of being this close to a breakthrough. Without being able to see clearly what is on the other side, you press against it, you pray over it, you fast over it, You cry over it, and the door remains closed. But beloved, a closed door that you keep returning to is not a sign that God has locked you out. It is a sign that God has not yet released what is behind it. And the reason it has not been released is not because you are not worthy. It is because what is behind that door requires a version of you that is still being completed. The door is not locked against you. The door is held for you. The fourth sign is that the same message keeps appearing to you from multiple different sources. A word in a sermon that lands like an arrow directly in your chest. A conversation you overhear that sounds like it was meant for your ears. A line in a book that you almost did not open. A video that appeared on your screen on a night when you almost did not press play. This is not coincidence. This is not the algorithm. This is a God who speaks in patterns, who places the same truth in multiple places because he knows how many times a chosen one needs to hear something before they are finally ready to receive it fully. And you are receiving it right now. Now I want to speak to some specific and particular pains. Not the general kind, but the ones that live in the specific rooms of your experience that most people are never invited into. I want to speak to the insomnia. The nights when your body is exhausted, but your mind will not stop rehearsing things. Old conversations, old wounds, old decisions you wish you could unmake. Scenarios about the future that you cannot control. You are not anxious because you lack faith. You are awake because something in you is so deeply invested in your life, so deeply committed to getting it right, that it cannot rest until it understands. That is not a flaw. That is a calling that has not yet found its full channel. When the channel opens, beloved, that same intensity that keeps you awake at night will become the very engine of your assignment. I want to speak to the loneliness. Not the loneliness of having no one around, but the particular loneliness of being surrounded by people who do not fully see you. The loneliness of laughing at the right moments and saying the right things, and performing the version of yourself that everyone is comfortable with, while the real you watches quietly from somewhere behind your eyes, still waiting to be known. That loneliness is real. It is one of the sharpest edges of a chosen season. But I need you to hear this. God sees the real you, not the performed version, not the polished version, not the version that has it together. The real, unguarded, aching, hoping, sometimes doubting, never fully stopping version of you. And that is the version he is working with. I want to speak to the feeling of being wronged, of having done everything right and still watching someone else advance, of having been faithful, honest, and committed, and still being the one who got overlooked, of having given your best and had it received as ordinary, or worse, not received at all. That pain is legitimate. You are allowed to feel it. It would be dishonest to rush past it and tell you it does not matter. It does matter. What was done to you mattered. What was taken from you mattered. But I need you to hold that truth alongside another truth, because both are real at the same time. What was done to you mattered, and it is not the end of your story. Now I want to reframe something for you, gently but completely, because the way you have been understanding your waiting season may be the very thing that is making it heavier than it needs to be. Most people experience waiting as punishment, as if the delay means something is wrong with them, as if God is withholding because they have not yet earned the release. And so they spend their waiting season in a low-grade shame, reviewing their failures, trying to identify the specific thing they must fix before God will move again. But that is not what waiting in the kingdom looks like. There are two very different experiences that can look identical from the outside. The first is being overlooked, which means being forgotten, passed by, deemed unworthy, left behind. The second is being positioned, which means being deliberately placed, carefully stationed, strategically held in a specific location for a specific reason that will only become clear at the appointed time. These two things look almost identical from where you are standing. The pain feels similar. The stillness looks similar. The silence from heaven can feel the same in both cases, but they are not the same. And, beloved, what you are in is not being overlooked. What you are in is being positioned. You are not in the waiting room because God ran out of space for you at the table. You are in the preparation room because the seat He has for you requires a version of you that is still being refined. You are not abandoned. You are protected. You are not forgotten. You are being assembled. And there is an enormous difference between those two things, even when they feel the same from the inside. You are not in this alone tonight. Right now, as you are taking in these words, there are chosen ones all across the world, sitting in their own version of this same stillness, carrying their own version of this same weight, asking their own version of this same question. You are part of a community you cannot see, but that is deeply real. And this community is not defined by comfort. It is defined by calling. You were each placed here, in this generation, to carry something that only your specific story has equipped you to carry. If these words have named something real in your experience tonight, if something in what I have said has reached a place inside you that has not been touched in a long time, I want to invite you to type the words "I see it" in the comments below. Not for me, not as a performance, but as an act of declaration for yourself. Because there is power in naming what you recognize. There is power in saying out loud, or in writing, "Yes, this is where I am, and I am no longer going to pretend otherwise." Type "I see it" if this message has found you tonight. And if this message has brought you something real, if it has given you language for a season you have been living without words for, I want to gently ask you to consider supporting this channel, not because content like this costs nothing to create, though it does, but because every time you give, you are not giving to me. You are sending this message further. You are making it possible for another chosen one, sitting alone in their own late night, in their own version of this silence, to find these words and feel less alone. You can give through the link in the pinned comment below. Whatever amount reflects what this has meant to you tonight is the right amount. And if you are not in a place to give financially right now, that is completely understood. But please share this video with one person you believe needs to hear it. Like it so that more people can find it. Subscribe so that the next message can find you when you need it most. Every action you take multiplies the reach of something that was made specifically to reach people who needed it to be found. You are seen tonight. You are known, and what is coming for you is already in motion. Something shifts when you stop trying to figure out what God is doing, and you simply begin to cooperate with what He is already doing. That shift is not passive. It is not resignation. It is not the spiritual version of giving up. It is actually one of the most active and courageous things a chosen one can do, because it requires you to release the grip of your own understanding and trust something larger than your own perspective. And tonight, I want to give you something practical to hold onto. Not a concept to think about, but a practice to actually do. Something you can carry into tomorrow morning and the morning after that. Something that does not require a special location, a specific time of day, or a level of spiritual discipline that feels out of reach right now. Because here is what I have learned about people in a season of waiting. They do not need more information. They have read the books. They have listened to the sermons. They have journaled and prayed and fasted, and believed and doubted and believed again. What they need is not more content to absorb. What they need is something to do with their hands, something to do with the quiet minutes of their day, something that connects the belief they carry in their spirit to the actual lived experience of their body. Because faith that never finds a practice stays in the abstract, and you were not made for the abstract. You were made for the real. So, I want to introduce you to something I am simply going to call the three-step return. It is not complicated. It does not require anything you do not already have. It requires only your willingness, your honesty, and 7 minutes of your time. And I chose the name carefully. Return, because this practice is not about going somewhere new. It is about returning to something that is already true about you. Something that the noise of life and the weight of waiting has temporarily covered over. Every time you do this practice, you are not building something from scratch. You are returning to the foundation that was laid before you were born, the truth of who you are and whose you are, and you are standing on it again with both feet. Here is how it works. Step 1 is this. Before anything else, before you open your eyes to the demands of the day or close them at the end of one, I want you to remember something that you are grateful for that did not happen. Not something that did happen, not a blessing you received, not a door that opened, but something that was kept from you. A relationship that did not work out that would have derailed you. A job you did not get that would have taken you in the wrong direction. A decision you almost made that would have cost you more than you knew at the time. A path you almost took that looked right from the outside but was not right for where you were going. Most of us spend our gratitude on what arrived. But there is a deeper layer of gratitude available to us when we begin to recognize the mercy in what was withheld. This is not a small exercise. It is actually one of the most spiritually transformative things you can train your mind to do, because it begins to rewrite the narrative of your life from one of lack to one of protection. When you look back at the things that did not happen, and you begin to see the hand of God in the withholding, you start to understand that the closed doors were not denials. They were redirections. They were acts of love from a Father who could see the full picture when you could only see the frame you were standing in. So sit with this for a moment. Let one thing come to mind. One thing that did not happen that, looking back, you can see was kept from you for a reason. Hold it, name it quietly, and say thank you for what was withheld. That is step 1. It takes as long as it takes. Some mornings it will come quickly. Some nights it will take a few minutes of honest searching. But it always comes. Because your life, no matter what season you are in, contains more mercy than pain, even when the pain is loud and the mercy is quiet. Step 2 is a statement, a spoken declaration that connects you to the understanding of time that we are exploring together in this message. And the statement is this. Say it aloud if you are able, and if not, say it firmly inside yourself where only you and God can hear it. The statement is this. I am not behind. I am not ahead. I am exactly where I am supposed to be, and what is appointed for me cannot be canceled, cannot be delayed beyond its time, and cannot be given to anyone else. It belongs to me, and it is already moving toward me. I want you to understand why this statement matters. Because the enemy of a chosen one's peace is almost never dramatic. It is rarely a grand attack. It is most often a quiet, persistent whisper that says you are late, that the people around you are moving, and you are standing still. That time is passing, and the window is closing, and if something does not change soon, it will be too late. And that whisper, if you do not counter it with truth, will do more damage to your faith than any external circumstance ever could. Because it works from the inside. It uses your own voice. It sounds reasonable. It sounds like wisdom. But it is a lie dressed in the language of practicality. The truth is that you are not operating on a human timeline. You are operating on an appointed timeline, and appointed timelines do not run late. They arrive exactly when they are meant to arrive, not a moment before, not a moment after, and never in the wrong hands. So when you make this declaration, you are not pretending that everything is fine. You are not denying the reality of your circumstances. You are choosing to place your trust in a larger timeline than the one your eyes can see. You are agreeing with God about who you are and what is coming. And that agreement has power. That agreement changes the atmosphere of your inner world. And your inner world is where your future is first constructed. Say the statement again if you need to. Let it settle. Let it push back against every whisper that has told you that you are falling behind. You are not falling behind. You are being positioned. Step 3 is 7 minutes of silence. And I want to explain this carefully because silence can feel like nothing when you are in a season that is already marked by too much stillness, too much waiting, too much quiet. The last thing some of you feel like you need is more silence. But this is a different kind of silence. This is not the silence of absence. This is the silence of intention. During these 7 minutes, you are not trying to hear anything. You are not straining for a word or a vision or a confirming feeling. You are simply making yourself available. You are putting down for 7 full minutes every argument your mind has been making, every plan you have been rehearsing, every fear you have been managing, every conversation you have been rehearsing in your head, and you are sitting in the presence of a God who sees you completely and loves you without condition. You are not performing. You are not producing. You are simply being present with the one who made you. 7 minutes is the specific duration, and this is not arbitrary. There is a reason that 7 minutes has emerged in research and in practice as a threshold. It takes roughly the first 2 minutes for the nervous system to begin to settle, for the cortisol, that's your fight or flight responses, to start to release its grip, for the constant background noise of your own thoughts to begin to slow. It takes another 2 to 3 minutes for something deeper to surface, for the part of you that does not speak in words to begin to open. And in those final 2 minutes, something becomes available that is not available in ordinary waking consciousness, a frequency, a receptivity, a quiet clarity that does not shout but that carries more weight than anything that has been shouted at you all week. I am going to come back to this 7-minute threshold later in this message because there is something specific and scientifically grounded that I want to share with you about what is actually happening in your brain during those 7 minutes and why the right kind of sound during that time can accelerate what would otherwise take much longer to reach. What researchers have discovered about the brainwave patterns of people who are operating at their highest level of creativity, problem-solving, and spiritual receptivity is something that I believe every chosen one needs to understand because it bridges the gap between what you believe in your spirit and what you experience in your daily life. But for now, I want you to simply commit to the practice. 3 steps, every day. At whatever time of day you can protect those minutes for yourself. You do not need a perfect environment. You do not need silence in the room around you, though it helps. You do not need to be in a particular mood or a particular state of mind. You only need your willingness. And willingness in a chosen one is never in short supply. You would not be here tonight if you were not willing. The morning after you begin this practice, something will feel slightly different. Not dramatically, not the way you might hope. But there will be a small, quiet shift in the quality of your inner atmosphere. A faint easing of the tension that has been sitting at the base of your chest. A slight return of something that felt like it had gone. You may dismiss it at first. You may tell yourself it is nothing, that you are imagining it, that one practice session cannot change something that has been building for years. But keep going. Because what shifts in the spirit world always takes a little time to become visible in the natural world. And the gap between those two moments, between the spiritual shift and the visible evidence, is exactly where faith is exercised. You are not doing this to feel better. You are doing this to align, to bring yourself back into resonance with the truth about who you are and what God is doing in your life. Because alignment is not just a spiritual concept, it is a practical state. When you are aligned, the right things find you, the right people recognize you, the right doors develop a crack of light around their edges that you begin to notice for the first time. Alignment does not make the journey easier exactly, but it makes you able to move through it in a completely different way. Begin tonight, or begin tomorrow morning, but begin. Not because you have everything figured out, not because you are feeling strong enough, but because the practice does not require strength. It requires only the decision to show up. And you, chosen one, have never stopped showing up. Even on the nights when showing up looked like simply still being here, still breathing, still holding on. That is enough to begin, and beginning is everything. There is something that the research keeps confirming, something that scientists who study the brain at its highest levels of performance have been saying for decades now, and it lines up with something that people of deep faith have always known intuitively. The people who operate at the peak of their creative capacity, who solve problems that others cannot solve, who seem to access ideas and insights that appear to come from somewhere beyond ordinary thinking. These people carry a specific internal frequency, not a metaphor, not a spiritual concept dressed in scientific language, an actual, measurable, documentable frequency that shows up in their brainwave patterns when they are at their best. And here is what makes this relevant to you tonight, chosen one. That frequency is not foreign to you. It is not reserved for a special class of intellectual elite. It is not something you have to develop from zero. It is something that was part of you before the world began to layer its noise over the top of it, before the disappointments accumulated, before the waiting grew long, before the weight of life began to press down on the part of you that was made to soar. That frequency is your inheritance, and there is a way to return to it. Researchers who study peak performance and cognitive function have identified two brainwave states that consistently appear in people who are operating at the highest levels of clarity, creativity, and intuitive intelligence. The first is called theta. Theta waves operate in the range of 4 to 8 cycles per second, and they are associated with deep creativity, accelerated learning, heightened intuition, and the kind of meditative awareness that most people only touch briefly before the demands of ordinary life pull them back to the surface. Children live in theta almost constantly. It is why they learn so quickly, why their imaginations are so alive, why they seem to access a wonder that most adults have forgotten how to find. As we grow older, as life becomes more complicated and more demanding, our brains spend less and less time in theta and more time in the faster, more analytical frequencies that help us manage the practical world, but that keep us away from the deeper well. The second frequency is called gamma. Gamma waves are the fastest brainwave frequency associated with conscious thought, and they are connected to what researchers describe as moments of sudden insight, what some call eureka moments. The flash of clarity that arrives when a problem that seemed impossible suddenly resolves itself in a single moment of illumination. Gamma is the frequency of the creative breakthrough. It is the frequency of the inventor in the moment of invention, the artist in the moment of revelation, the leader in the moment when the right answer arrives, fully formed. And in the language of faith, gamma is the frequency of what happens when heaven downloads something into a willing and prepared mind. Now, why does this matter for you? Because you were designed to operate in these frequencies. The frustration you have been feeling, the sense of a gift inside you that has not yet found its full expression, the creative restlessness that keeps you awake at night. These are not signs that something is wrong with you. They are signs that something inside you is pressing toward a frequency it was made for, but has been kept from by the accumulated weight of stress, disappointment, and the kind of chronic low-grade anxiety that comes with a long season of waiting. The bridge between where you are and where your frequency is meant to be has been the subject of more than 30 years of dedicated research by a neuroscientist whose work I want to introduce you to now. His name is Dr. James Rivers. Dr. Rivers was trained at MIT, one of the most rigorous scientific institutions in the world, and his research career has included collaboration with programs affiliated with NASA, organizations that have a profound interest in understanding how the human brain performs at the absolute edge of its capacity. Because the people who go to space cannot afford to operate at anything less than their peak. What Dr. Rivers discovered over the course of his research career is something that began as a scientific inquiry and became, for many people who have encountered his work, something that felt deeply personal and deeply spiritual. His central finding is this: the human brain is not fixed in its frequency. It is not locked into whatever state stress and time and circumstance have pressed it into. The brain has a property called entrainment, which means that it can synchronize with external frequencies. Just as a tuning fork held near another tuning fork will cause the second one to begin vibrating at the same pitch, the brain, when exposed to precisely calibrated sound frequencies, will begin to align with those frequencies. It will shift from the high stress, high speed frequencies of anxiety and overwhelm into the deeper, richer, more generative frequencies of theta and gamma. And this shift is not subtle. It is measurable, it is documentable, and it is available to anyone. The tool that Dr. Rivers developed based on this research is called the Genius Wave. And before I tell you what it is and how it works, I want to tell you what it is not. It is not a magic solution. It is not a shortcut past the work of becoming who you are meant to be. It is not a replacement for faith, for prayer, for the practices we talked about earlier in this message. What it is a precise and carefully constructed audio experience that uses binaural beats and isochronic tones, two forms of sound technology that have been studied extensively for their effect on brainwave activity, to guide your brain into the theta Ammon states that are associated with peak creative performance, heightened intuition, accelerated learning, and what many users describe as a profound sense of mental clarity and inner quiet. The protocol is simple. You listen for 7 minutes. That is it. You put on your headphones, you press play, and for 7 minutes, you allow the precisely engineered frequencies in the audio to do what they were designed to do, which is to bring your brain back into resonance with the frequency it was built to carry. This is why I mentioned the 7-minute silent practice in the previous part of this message. Those 7 minutes of intentional stillness are already creating a window of receptivity in your nervous system. The Genius Wave simply fills that window with the precise frequency that helps your brain make the shift more completely and more consistently than silence alone. I want to share something with you now. A story that is not mine, but that belongs to someone who was, not long ago, in a place very similar to where you may be sitting tonight. There was a woman named Sandra who had spent 14 months in what she described as a complete standstill. Her career had plateaued in a way she could not explain. Her creative work, which had once flowed freely, had dried up entirely. She was sleeping poorly, thinking in circles, and beginning to quietly wonder whether the version of herself that had once felt capable and alive was simply gone. She came across the genius wave not through a dramatic moment of inspiration, but through the kind of ordinary, almost accidental discovery that chosen ones will recognize immediately, because it never feels entirely accidental. She committed to 7 minutes a day for 3 weeks. By the end of the first week, she reported that her sleep had changed. Not dramatically, but noticeably. She was falling asleep more easily and waking up with a quality of thought that she had not experienced in over a year. By the end of the second week, she had completed a creative project that she had been unable to finish for 6 months. By the end of the third week, she received a professional opportunity that she described as arriving completely out of nowhere, but feeling, when it arrived, like something that had been prepared for her long in advance. I am not telling you that 7 minutes of audio will resolve every complexity of your situation. I am telling you that the frequency you were designed to carry is accessible. And there is a tool grounded in serious research and experienced by tens of thousands of people that can help you access it. Now, I know that some of you are sitting with a very practical thought right now, and I want to address it directly before we go any further. I know that some of you are thinking that $39 is not a small amount. I know that some of you are in seasons where every dollar is accounted for, and any additional expense requires a genuine decision. And I want to honor that. I want you to know that your hesitation is valid and that I am not going to dismiss it or talk past it. The cost of something is a real consideration, and pretending otherwise would be disrespectful to where we actually are. But I also want to invite you to hold that consideration alongside another one. The cost of staying in a frequency that is not yours is also real. The cost of another month in the mental fog, in the creative drought, in the low-grade anxiety of a mind that cannot find its rest, that cost is being paid by you every single day. And if there is a tool, backed by more than 30 years of research, used successfully by more than 19,000 people, that costs less than a single dinner out. I want you to at least let yourself consider it seriously. The regular price of the Genius Wave is $49, but through the link in the pinned comment below this video, you can access it today for just $39. That is the price available right now through that specific link for a limited time. It also comes with a full 90-day money-back guarantee. 90 days is more than 12 weeks of daily practice. If you commit to 7 minutes a day for 90 days and you do not experience a meaningful shift in your clarity, your creativity, your quality of sleep, your sense of inner alignment, you get your money back. Every dollar of it. No complicated process. No difficult questions. The guarantee is real because the research is real, and because the people behind this product stand behind what they have created. I do need to say one more thing clearly and directly. There are imitation versions of this product circulating in various places online, and I want to protect you from wasting your money on something that is not the real tool. The only place to access the genuine Genius Wave, the version that is built on Dr. Rivers' actual research, and that carries the 90-day guarantee, is through the single link in the pinned comment below this video. Not through a search engine, not through a third-party site, only through that link. Please protect yourself by using only that source. And finally, this offer is time-sensitive. The price available today is not guaranteed to remain at $39. The number of units available at this price point is limited, and when that limit is reached, the price returns to $49. I am not telling you this to pressure you. I am telling you this because if the 7 minutes of silence in your daily practice have already begun to open something in you, and if what I have shared about the research and the frequency resonates with something you already know about yourself, then I do not want the decision to wait to cost you the opportunity. The link is in the pinned comment. It will be there when you are ready. And if you are ready now, beloved, do not let the moment pass. And even as I tell you about what is available to you, even as I point toward the tools and the frequencies and the possibilities that are opening up in this season, I need to stop for a moment. I need to slow down deliberately and turn towards something that does not get said enough in messages like this one. Because there is a part of you that has been quietly waiting for someone to acknowledge it, not to fix it, not to reframe it into something more palatable, not to wrap it in a promise and move quickly past it, but to simply sit with it and call it by its right name. The years of waiting have taken something from you, and I am not going to rush past that. I want you to hear me say it plainly and without softening it too quickly. The season you have been in has cost you things that cannot be fully recovered. Not in the sense that your future is diminished, because it is not. Not in the sense that what is coming cannot be beautiful and full and more than you have dared to imagine, because it can be and it will be. But in the honest, unglamorous sense that real time passed. Real years moved through your life, and in those years there were things that could have been. Things that were within reach and then were not. Things that you set down because the weight of the waiting did not leave room for you to carry everything. Let me name some of them, because naming is its own form of honor. There were relationships that could have been built. Friendships that needed more of you than you had available to give. Connections that might have deepened into something lasting but that faded instead, not because of a lack of love, but because a person stretched thin by a long season of struggle does not always have the emotional reserves to tend to every relationship the way they wish they could. You may have watched some of those connections drift, and you told yourself that you would come back to them when things settled, when the waiting was over, when you had more to give, and some of them waited, and some of them did not, and the ones that did not, you carry them quietly. The phone calls you did not make, the invitations you did not accept, the version of yourself that could have shown up fully for the people you love if the season had been lighter. That is real, and it deserves to be acknowledged. There is also the career that could have gone further by now. The ambitions you set aside not because you abandoned them, but because surviving a long season of uncertainty requires a kind of triage, and the dreams that felt furthest from immediate reality were the ones that got quietly deprioritized. You watched people around you advance. You watched opportunities move through the space where your name could have been and land somewhere else instead. You told yourself that your time was coming, and you believed it, mostly. But there were also the quiet moments when you opened your laptop or sat in a meeting or drove past a building that represented something you once wanted. And the gap between where you are and where you thought you would be by now felt enormous and heavy and difficult to explain to anyone who had not felt it themselves. There is the freedom to tell your big dreams out loud. Do you remember when you used to do that? When you would say the large, specific, particular thing that you were building toward without immediately bracing for the look on someone's face. At some point in the waiting, most chosen ones quietly stop, saying the big thing out loud, not because they stopped believing it, but because the accumulated experience of watching time pass without visible progress makes the dream feel somehow private, somehow too tender to expose to the open air of other people's opinions. And so you began to hold it closer and speak of it less, and the version of you that could dream loudly and without apology became something you visited in your quieter moments but rarely brought fully into the light. And then there is the most personal cost of all, the faith in yourself, not your faith in God, because that has survived things that should have broken it, and it is still here, which is its own kind of miracle. But your faith in yourself, your trust in your own instincts, your own timing, your own ability to read a situation and make a right call. Long seasons of waiting have a way of quietly eroding that particular confidence. Because when you try and it does not work, and you try again and it does not work, and you pray and believe and step forward and the door does not open, eventually a small but insidious voice begins to suggest that maybe the problem is you, that maybe your judgment is off, that maybe the version of you that believed you were meant for something significant was simply mistaken, and you never fully agreed with that voice. But you also could not entirely silence it, and so it sat there, in the background, just loud enough to make you hesitate when you would otherwise have moved. I see that. I see all of it, and I am not going to tell you that it does not matter, or that the cost was not real, or that everything happens for a reason in a way that makes the loss feel smaller than it was. The cost was real. The years were real. The things that were taken or that faded or that you had to set aside, they were real, and you are allowed to grieve them. You are allowed to sit in that grief without immediately reaching for the silver lining. Because the silver lining is real too, and it is coming, and we will get there, but not yet. Not before we have properly honored what this season has cost you. There was a man in the ancient story whose name was Joseph. And I want to tell you about him, not the triumphant version that everyone rushes toward at the end of his story, but the difficult version, the version that most people move past too quickly because it is uncomfortable to stay in. Joseph was a young man who carried a dream, a specific, God-given dream about his future, about who he was and what he was being prepared for. And the dream was real. It was genuinely from God. It was not arrogance or delusion. It was a true vision of what was appointed for him. And yet, what followed that dream was not the fulfillment of it. What followed was a sequence of losses so complete and so compounding that any reasonable person looking at his life from the outside would have concluded that the dream was simply wrong. His own brothers, the people who should have been his protection, became the agents of his first great loss. They stripped him of the robe that represented his father's particular love for him, the robe that was the outward symbol of his calling, and they threw him into a pit and sat down to eat their meal while he cried out from below. Sit with that image for a moment, not the theological interpretation of it, just the human reality of it. A young man in a pit, calling out to the people who put him there and hearing them, eating and talking above him as if his voice did not reach them, as if his pain was not loud enough to interrupt their meal. If that is not the image of a chosen one in the depth of a season of being overlooked, I do not know what is, and it did not end with the pit. It continued. He was sold. He was taken to a foreign country. He was separated from everything familiar, from his father who loved him, from the landscape of home, from the language of belonging. He built something new in that foreign place, built trust and reputation, and a position of responsibility. And then he was accused of something he did not do, and he was imprisoned. He did not deserve the pit. He did not deserve the sale. He did not deserve the prison. And in that prison, He helped a man who promised to remember him and then forgot him entirely. The waiting compounded on the waiting. The loss compounded on the loss. I am not telling you Joseph's story to get to the ending. I am telling you the difficult part, because I want you to know that the Bible does not sanitize the cost of a chosen season. It does not skip over the years in the pit. It does not fast forward through the time in the prison. It holds those years with the same weight and the same honesty with which it holds the eventual vindication. Because those years mattered. They were not filler. They were not simply the blank space before the good part started. They were the very texture of what made Joseph into the man who could carry what was coming. And beloved, the same is true for you. The years that have felt like loss were not wasted years, but they were also genuinely hard years. And you are allowed to know both of those things at the same time. You are allowed to hold the weight of what it cost in one hand and the promise of what is coming in the other hand, without being required to drop either one before you are ready. The faith in yourself that was shaken by the long season, it is not gone. It is buried under something that can be moved. The dreams you stopped saying out loud are not dead. They are held in a place where they could not be taken from you, waiting for the season in which it becomes safe to speak them again. The relationships that faded, some of them are not permanently lost. They are simply in a season of their own. And the career, the opportunities, the advancement that seemed to pass you by, beloved, the appointed time has a way of compressing what seemed like lost ground into a single moment of acceleration that makes up in one season what felt like it was missed in many. But first, we sit here. First, we acknowledge what it cost. First, we give the pain the dignity of being named, because a wound that is not named cannot be fully healed. And you, chosen one, deserve to be fully healed. Not partially, not cosmetically, not in the way that looks healed from the outside while still aching quietly on the inside. Fully, deeply, completely, in every room of your experience, including the rooms that you have kept locked because they felt too painful to open. God is not afraid of those rooms. He has a key to every one of them. And in the season that is now beginning, He is moving through every room of your life, not to expose you, but to restore you. Not to remind you of the cost, but to multiply what remains into something greater than what was lost. The restoration is already in motion, and it begins here, in this moment of honest acknowledgement, where you finally allow yourself to say, yes, it was hard, and yes, it cost me, and yes, I am still here, and yes, I am ready for what comes next. There is a language that exists beneath the language we use every day. It is older than any modern tongue. It carries meanings that our ordinary words can gesture toward but cannot fully contain. And tonight, I want to reach into that older language, not to impress you with scholarship, not to make this feel academic or distant, but because sometimes the reason we cannot find peace in our current season is that we are trying to understand a sacred process using vocabulary that was never designed to hold it. The words available to us in ordinary conversation are simply too small for what God is doing in your life right now. And when the words are too small, the experience feels incomprehensible. And when the experience feels incomprehensible, the silence of heaven feels like absence rather than intention. So, let me give you some larger words. Let me give you the kind of language that was forged in the fire of ancient experience, by people who lived through seasons just like yours, and who searched in the depths of their own pain for a framework that could make sense of what they were enduring. They found it, and they passed it down, and tonight it belongs to you. The first concept I want to give you comes from the ancient Greek language, and it is a word that draws a line between two entirely different understandings of time. The word is kairos. And to understand kairos, you first have to understand the word it stands in contrast to, which is chronos. Chronos is the time. You already know. It is the time on your clock and your calendar. It is the time that moves in one direction, steadily, indifferently, without regard for whether you are ready or not, without pausing when you need it to pause, and without accelerating when you desperately need to move forward. Chronos is the time that has been passing while you waited. It is the time you have been counting, the months and the years that have accumulated in your waiting season, each one feeling like evidence that the promise is moving further away rather than closer. But kairos is something entirely different. Kairos is not measured in seconds or months or years. Kairos is the right moment, the appointed moment, the moment that arrives not because the clock reached a particular number, but because the conditions, seen and unseen, visible and invisible, human and divine, have finally aligned in exactly the configuration required for the thing that is meant to happen. Kairos does not run on Chronos time. Kairos runs on heaven's time, and heaven's time has never once been late, even when it has felt, from inside the human experience of Chronos, as though it has taken far longer than it should. Here is what this means for you tonight. Chosen one. The years you have been counting, the months that have felt like they were slipping away, the mornings you have woken up and felt the weight of another day beginning without the breakthrough you have been praying for. Those are all chronos. Experiences, real experiences, genuinely hard experiences. But they are not the whole picture. Beneath the chronos surface of your life, something else has been moving. Something that does not report to your calendar or your clock. Something that has been building toward a kairos moment that your chronos perspective cannot yet see. And kairos moments, when they arrive, do not arrive gradually. They arrive completely. They do not trickle in. They break in like light through a window that has been suddenly opened. And everyone who witnesses it can see that something has changed, even if they cannot fully explain how or why. You are not in a chronos delay. You are in a kairos preparation. And those two things are not the same. A chronos delay suggests that something went wrong, that a plan was disrupted, that you are now behind a schedule that should have moved more quickly. A kairos preparation suggests that everything is precisely on track, that the preparation you are in is not a detour from the destination but the actual road that leads there, and that the moment of arrival is not being postponed but is being perfectly timed. This is not a reward for your effort. This is not something you earn by being patient enough or faithful enough or disciplined enough. This is positioning. This is the sovereign placement of a chosen one in the exact location required for the appointed moment to find them ready. The second concept I want to give you comes from the ancient Hebrew, and it is a single word that carries an entire philosophy of waiting inside it. The word is kava. In most modern translations of Scripture, kava is translated simply as wait. But that translation, while not wrong, is desperately incomplete. Because kava does not mean to sit passively and do nothing until something changes. The root image of kava is the image of braiding a rope, twisting multiple strands together, each one wound tightly around the others, creating through the act of deliberate interweaving a cord that is far stronger than any single strand could be alone. That is what kava means. To wait in the way that a rope maker waits, actively, intentionally, twisting together the strands of prayer and trust and continued faithfulness, and the daily practice of showing up even when nothing visible is changing. Think about what that means for the years you have been in. Every day that you chose to get up and keep going, that was a strand being twisted into the rope. Every prayer you prayed into what felt like silence, that was a strand. Every act of faithfulness when unfaithfulness would have been easier. Every choice to trust when cynicism was more available. Every morning you opened your eyes and decided to still believe, even faintly, even uncertainly. Each one of those was a strand. And what you have been making through all of these years of what felt like passive, purposeless waiting is actually a rope of extraordinary strength. A rope that was not there at the beginning of your season. A rope that could only be made through the specific process of time and tension and continued engagement with the practice of trust. You are not delayed, beloved. You are being assembled. The strands of everything you have lived through, everything you have survived, everything you have learned in the quiet and the difficult and the disorienting seasons, they are being braided together right now into something that can hold the weight of what is coming. Because what is coming is heavy with purpose, and it needed a rope strong enough to hold it. And you have been making that rope one day at a time, without always knowing that was what you were doing. Now I want to speak to the specific texture of the season you have been in, because it has a name that is older than you and more purposeful than it has felt. It is called the wilderness season. And before you brace against that word, before the part of you that it's tired of difficult seasons contracts against the idea of being given another framework for endurance, I want to offer you a different way to hear it. The wilderness in the ancient story was not simply a place of punishment or abandonment. It was the specific terrain that appeared between the old life and the promised life, between the place of captivity and the place of destiny, between who the people were when they began and who they needed to become in order to inhabit what was being prepared for them. The wilderness was the transformation zone. It was the place where the habits of the old life were shed, where the dependencies that would have undermined the new life were identified and released, where the character required to steward the coming season was formed, under the pressure of conditions that no comfortable environment could have produced. Moses spent 40 years in a wilderness before he was ready to lead, not because God needed 40 years to prepare the words he would speak, but because Moses needed 40 years to become the man who could carry those words without being destroyed by the weight of them. David spent years in the caves and the desert places, hunted and displaced, and living in conditions that were the opposite of the palace he had been promised. Not because God had abandoned the promise, but because the caves were making something in David that the palace could not make. A shepherd king needs to know what the sheep feel in the dark. He needs to know what it is to be hunted. He needs to know what it is to survive on trust alone when every visible support has been removed. The wilderness did not delay David's destiny. The wilderness was the specific and irreplaceable preparation for it. And your wilderness, the particular isolation and disorientation and difficulty of the season you have been navigating, it has been doing something in you that no comfortable season could have done. It has been removing what you did not need. It has been strengthening what you could not afford to lose. It has been teaching you the specific lessons that the next season of your life absolutely requires you to know. Lessons about your own resilience that you could not have believed about yourself if you had not lived them. Lessons about who your real allies are. Lessons that can only be learned when the fair supporters have quietly departed and the ones who stayed are revealed. Lessons about prayer that only become available when prayer is the only resource left. The wilderness is not a punishment. It is a preparation. And the fact that you are still standing in it, still praying in it, still showing up to messages like this one in it, still refusing to let the difficulty be the final word on who you are and what you are made for. That is not stubbornness. That is the evidence of a chosen one who is nearly finished with the preparation. Because the people who are not chosen for what is coming do not usually stay this long. They find an easier path and they take it. But you are still here, still pressing, still holding the rope of Kava with both hands, still trusting in the Kairos moment even while living in the Chronos experience of the wait. I need you to hear this with every part of you that has been tired and questioning and silently wondering if you misread the whole thing. You did not misread it. The dream was real. The calling is real. The appointed time is real. And what God has ordained, no delay in the Chronos world can cancel. The wilderness season ends. It always ends. Not because the person in it finally became strong enough to force their way out, but because the preparation is completed and the appointed arrives and heaven opens what it has been holding. And the person who walked into the wilderness as one version of themselves walks out as someone who is finally, fully, completely ready for everything that was always meant for them. That is where you are headed. Not eventually. Not someday in the abstract future. The Kairos moment is closer than your Chronos experience can perceive. The rope you have been braiding is nearly complete. The wilderness is nearly finished with what it came to do in you. And what is waiting on the other side of this season is not a consolation prize for endurance. It is the fullness of what was always appointed for you, arriving right on time, in the only form it could take after the preparation you have been given. You are not delayed. You are not abandoned. You are not behind. You are exactly where the appointed time requires you to be, and the appointed time is coming. It is already moving towards you. And nothing in heaven or earth can stop it from finding you exactly where you are. Something is shifting right now, not in the distant future, not in the someday that always seems to be just beyond the next horizon. Right now, in this present moment, in the season you are actually standing in, something is beginning to move that has been still for a long time. And I want you to feel that before I name it. Before I give it language and structure, and the kind of organized clarity that makes it easier to receive intellectually, I want you to simply feel it for a moment. Because the feeling came before the understanding, the sensing came before the seeing, and what you have been sensing, that low hum of approaching change, that faint but persistent awareness that something is about to break open, that is not wishful thinking. That is your spirit receiving information that your eyes have not yet been given access to. There is something coming for you in 3 specific areas of your life. And I want to be as concrete as I can about what that looks like, because you have been given enough beautiful language about transformation that has not yet arrived at the practical level of your daily experience. So tonight, I am going to be specific. I am going to tell you what to watch for, what you are going to feel, and what I need you to be careful not to do during this transitional period. Because the thing about a season of breakthrough is that it can be interrupted. Not canceled, never canceled, but delayed by choices made in the crucial window just before the breakthrough fully arrives. And I love you too much to let you miss what is coming, because no one warned you about the very specific ways that chosen ones tend to accidentally step backward in the moment just before they step fully forward. But first, I want to speak to what you are feeling right now. Because the internal experience of a person who is on the edge of their breakthrough does not always feel like what you might expect it to feel like. People imagine that the approach of a breakthrough feels triumphant, like a rising crescendo, like a building wave of confidence and clarity that announces itself clearly. And sometimes it does feel that way. But more often, the edge of a breakthrough feels something like the feeling you have right now, a strange mixture of exhaustion and aliveness, a simultaneous sense of being completely worn out by the length of the season and completely awake to the possibility that something is finally about to change. A feeling that is difficult to explain to someone who has not felt it, because it is not quite hope, and it is not quite certainty, and it is not quite peace, but it contains elements of all three, braided together in a way that is uncomfortable and beautiful at the same time. That feeling is a signal. It is your spirit recognizing a shift in the atmosphere around your life. It is the deep, instinctive awareness of a chosen one who has been prepared long enough to know the difference between ordinary days and threshold days. And beloved, this is a threshold day. This is the kind of moment that you will look back on from the other side of the breakthrough and say, that was when it started. That was the night everything began to move. Not because of anything dramatic that happened externally, but because something in me finally aligned with what God had been preparing all along. Now, let me tell you specifically what is coming in the three areas where you are about to see the most significant movement. The first area is relationships. And I want you to hear this carefully, because the relational shift that is coming may feel disorienting before it feels liberating. What is about to happen in your relational world is a kind of natural reorganization. People who have been present in your life, but who do not belong in the next chapter of your story, are going to begin to move on their own. Not through dramatic confrontation, not through painful rupture, though some may involve a degree of difficulty, but through a gentle and organic distancing that, when you look back on it, will feel like it was managed by a hand much wiser than either yours or theirs. They will become busy. They will drift. The conversations will become less frequent, and the connection will become vital. And eventually, the space between you will simply grow into something that no longer requires active maintenance. And you may grieve some of those distances. You may feel the absence of people who have been familiar presences in your life, even if those presences were not always entirely healthy for you. But even as those distances form, something else is happening simultaneously. New people are being positioned at the edges of your life right now. You may have already encountered one or two of them without fully recognizing what you were seeing. A conversation that felt unusually alive. A person who seemed to understand something about you that you had never articulated. An encounter that felt, in its quality and its timing, slightly too precise to be entirely random. These are the first appearances of the relational community that belongs to your next season. They speak a frequency that matches yours. They carry a purpose that complements yours. They are arriving not because you sought them out, though you may have, but because the appointed time for your paths to converge has come. Watch for them, receive them without suspicion, and do not let the grief of the relationships that are naturally ending prevent you from opening to the connections that are naturally beginning. The second area is purpose, and I want to say this as simply and as directly as I can. The question that has been circling in you for so long, the question of what you are supposed to be doing, the specific direction your gifts and your energy and your faith are meant to move in, that question is about to answer itself. Not through a vision on a mountainside, not through a dramatic revelation that arrives fully formed and leaves no room for doubt, but through a single small step that presents itself with unusual clarity. One thing, one specific, practical, doable thing that you will look at and know with a certainty that bypasses your analytical mind and speaks directly to your spirit that this is the step. It will not look like the whole staircase. it will only look like one step, and the temptation in that moment will be to say that it is too small, that it cannot possibly be the beginning of what you have been imagining, that something as significant as the purpose you have been carrying for this long should announce itself with more fanfare. Do not let that voice win. The small step is the appointed step, and the whole staircase only becomes visible once you are standing on the first one. Purpose reveals itself in motion, not in stillness, and the single clear step that is about to present itself to you is the motion that unlocks the next level of revelation. Take it. Take it even if it feels small. Take it even if you cannot yet see where it leads. Take it because the God who has been preparing you for this long does not offer small steps accidentally. Every step he offers is load-bearing. Every step he places before you is connected to something much larger than the step itself can reveal. The third area is resources and opportunities. And I need to say something here that is important and that I want you to receive without the filter of the previous seasons in which you had to fight for everything. What is coming in this area is not going to require you to fight in the way you have been fighting. You have been striving, you have been pushing, you have been working harder and longer and with more effort than the results seemed to justify. And you have felt the exhaustion of pouring out more than what was coming back. And that has been real. That has been the legitimate experience of a chosen one in a season where the resources were tight and the opportunities were scarce, and everything that came required an enormous expenditure of energy to obtain. But the season that is shifting now carries a different quality of movement. What is yours is going to begin to find you. Opportunities that you did not have to manufacture. Resources that arrive through channels you did not have to create. Open doors that present themselves without you having to knock on them for months to receive a response. This is not because you have suddenly become luckier or because the external world has changed. This is because you have been positioned. This is the Kairos moment beginning to make itself felt in the practical, material dimensions of your life. What was appointed for you cannot be held back any longer. And when appointed things are released, they do not arrive with struggle. They arrive with a sense of rightness, a sense of finally, a sense that something long overdue has simply arrived in the right hour. Now, here is what I need you to be careful about during this window. This is the warning I promised you, and I want you to hear it with the same seriousness with which you have been hearing everything else tonight. The most dangerous thing a chosen one can do in the window just before their breakthrough is to make a decision out of impatience, to see the shift beginning and then try to accelerate it through their own effort, to feel the first movements of change and then grab hold of the steering wheel because the speed of the movement does not match the urgency they feel inside. I understand that urgency. After a long season of stillness, the first signs of movement create a powerful impulse to do everything at once, to make up for lost time, to prove to yourself and to everyone watching that you were right to wait. But that impulse, however understandable, can actually slow what is already moving on your behalf. What is required of you in this window is not more effort, it is more alignment. Continue the practice we discussed. Continue the 7 minutes of daily stillness and declaration. Continue the 3-step return that grounds you in gratitude and truth every day. Allow the shift to move at its own pace, which will be faster than you expect once you stop trying to push it, and stay close to the people, the practices, and the perspectives that keep you in the frequency of the season you are entering rather than the season you are leaving. You are not arriving at something unfamiliar. You are arriving at something that was made for you before you were made for it. And the arrival does not require your striving. It only requires your presence. Stay present, stay aligned, stay in the practice, and watch what God does with the season that is now beginning to open around you. If what I have shared in this part of the message has landed in you, if something in the description of these 3 areas has touched a place of recognition in your spirit, I want to invite you to type the words I receive in the comments below, not as a passive acknowledgement, but as an active declaration. Because there is a spiritual principle at work in the act of receiving. What you open yourself to, you make space for. And tonight, beloved, you are making space for everything that belongs to you. Type I receive if you are ready to let it in. You just declared something. When you type those words, or even when you said them quietly in the interior of yourself, you did something that carries more weight than it may have felt like in the moment. You opened a door, not metaphorically, not in the vague, inspirational sense that gets used so often it loses its meaning. You opened something real in the spiritual architecture of your life, a space of receptivity, a posture of readiness, a declaration to the unseen realm that you are no longer simply enduring what is coming, but actively welcoming it. And that shift, from endurance to reception, is one of the most significant transitions a chosen one can make, because endurance is a posture of survival. Reception is a posture of inheritance. And what God has for you was never meant to be survived. It was meant to be inherited, fully, joyfully, without apology, and without the diminished expectation that a long season of waiting can quietly install in the heart of even the most faithful person. So as we move into this part of the message, I want to do something specific for you. I want to give you a name. Not the name your parents gave you, and not the name that the hard seasons have tried to assign to you, names like too late, or almost, or not quite enough. I want to give you the name that belongs to who you are becoming through everything you have walked through. Because there is a version of you that is emerging from this season, and that version of you deserves to be named and recognized before it is fully visible. Because naming something before it is fully visible is one of the most powerful acts of faith available to a human being. It is what God did when He called Abraham, the father of many nations, before Abraham had a single child to his name. It is what He did when He called Gideon a mighty warrior while Gideon was hiding in a winepress. It is what He does with chosen ones in every generation. He speaks the name of who they are becoming into the season in which they are still becoming it. And the name I want to give you tonight is this: you are a cycle breaker. Not in the casual sense in which that phrase sometimes gets used. I want to explain to you specifically and carefully what this name means and why it belongs to you, because it carries a weight and a dignity that goes far beyond a motivational label. A cycle breaker is someone who stands at the intersection of what has been, what will be, and who absorbs, through their own body and their own faith and their own willingness to endure what others walked away from, the full momentum of a generational pattern, and stops it. Not through force, not through willpower alone, but through the specific combination of suffering and surrender and faithfulness that produces in a person the spiritual density required to interrupt the momentum that has been building for longer than their own lifetime. The cycles that a cycle breaker interrupts are not simple habits or personal preferences. They are deep-running patterns. Patterns of poverty, of broken relationships, of unfulfilled potential, of faith that started strong and faded before it reached its promise. Patterns that have repeated themselves across generations, each repetition a little more entrenched, a little harder to see from the inside, a little more normalized by the people living within them. And you, beloved, were placed at this specific point in your family's story, in your community's story, in the story of everyone whose life will eventually be touched by yours. To be the one who breaks the pattern, not the one who improves it slightly, not the one who manages it more skillfully than the people before them, the one who ends it, the one who stands in the gap between the old story and the new one and says, with everything they have and everything they are, this is where the old thing stops and the new thing begins. That is who you are. That is the specific and irreplaceable role you carry in this generation. And I need you to hear this, because a cycle breaker often does not feel like a cycle breaker from the inside. From the inside, a cycle breaker feels like someone who is struggling more than the people around them, not less. They feel the full weight of the pattern they are interrupting in a way that people who simply inherit the pattern continued it never had to feel. Because you cannot break something without being in contact with it. You cannot interrupt a cycle without being inside it long enough to understand it fully. The difficulty of your season is not evidence that you are failing at your purpose. It is evidence that your purpose is working through you. Now I want to lead you through something, a visualization exercise, a guided moment of internal seeing. And I want you to participate in this not as a passive observer, but as an active participant. Because what we do in the imagination with intention has a real effect on the neural pathways and spiritual receptivity of a person who is on the edge of their breakthrough. I want you to picture yourself standing at a threshold. It does not need to be elaborate. It can be as simple as a doorway, a plain wooden frame set in a wall, with one side that you are standing on and another side that you cannot yet fully see. You are standing right at the edge of it, not inside it yet, not fully through it, but at the place where one world ends and another begins. Now I want you to turn around slowly. Look back at the territory you have just crossed. Look at the landscape of the season you have been in. It may look different from this angle than it looked while you were inside it. From here, at the threshold, you can see the full shape of what you walked through. The long stretches of what felt like nothing happening. The moments of near breakthrough that retreated before they fully arrived. The places where you fell and got up. The places where you almost did not get up. The relationships that changed. The dreams that went quiet. The nights that were very long. Look at all of it. Not with shame, not with grief exactly, though some grief may be present. Look at it, the way a person looks at a wilderness they have just crossed. With the knowledge that they made it, that the terrain did not defeat them, that every step they took through that landscape, even the stumbling ones, even the ones taken in the wrong direction before being corrected, brought them to exactly this point, the threshold, standing here, ready. Now turn forward again. Look at what is ahead. You cannot see it completely. The other side of the threshold has a quality of light to it, a particular luminousness that suggests what is there without revealing it entirely. And that partial visibility is intentional. Because if you could see it completely from here, you would not need faith to step through. And faith is not a required element of this journey, because God enjoys demanding things of you unnecessarily. Faith is required because the act of stepping through a threshold you cannot fully see is what transforms you from the person who walked through the wilderness into the person who can steward what is on the other side. The stepping is the final part of the preparation, and it requires you to move before you have complete visibility. But notice something important. You are already standing at the threshold. You did not have to travel to get here tonight. You are not still in the middle of the wilderness looking toward a destination that is far away. You are here, at the edge, at the place where the old thing ends and the new thing begins. Everything you have walked through has brought you to exactly this point. And this point is not the middle of the journey. This point is the threshold of the new season. You are already here. You have been already here. And the step through is not a giant, terrifying leap into the unknown. It is a single, natural, almost inevitable movement of a person who has been walking in one direction long enough that the next step is simply the continuation of the same faithful motion that brought them this far. Now I want to speak something over you, not as a performance, not as a formula, but as a genuine blessing that I am releasing over the specific version of you that is standing at this threshold tonight, because you deserve to be sent forward with something good spoken over you. Too many chosen ones have been sent into their next seasons, carrying only the weight of what the previous season said about them. Tonight, I want to add something different to what you carry through the threshold. May you have the courage to take the first step even before the full picture is visible. May you recognize the new people when they appear without making them prove themselves beyond what is reasonable. May the small step that represents your purpose present itself to you with unmistakable clarity, and may you take it without waiting for it to look larger than it is. May the resources that belong to your next season find you without requiring you to exhaust yourself in the pursuit of them. May the cycles that were broken in you bring freedom to everyone whose life will be changed by yours. May you sleep deeply in the nights ahead, because your nervous system has finally been given permission to rest, and may you wake with a quality of inner clarity that you have not felt in a very long time. May the God who placed you here, in this generation, in this body, in this specific and irreplaceable story, continue to make himself unmistakably known to you in the days that are coming. Not in the abstract, but in the specific. Not in the theological, but in the personal. In the conversation that surprises you. In the door that opens before you knock. In the quiet morning moment when something in you settles, and you know, not by sight and not by feeling, but by a deep and unshakable knowing that you are held, that you are seen, that you are loved, that you are exactly where the appointed time requires you to be, and that what is coming is worth every single step it took to arrive here. You are a cycle breaker, and the cycle ends with you. And what begins with you is something this world has been waiting for. The blessing I just spoke over you was not decoration. It was not the kind of beautiful language that sounds meaningful in the moment and then dissolves into the ordinary air of the next day without leaving anything behind. Every word of it was intentional. Every line of it was aimed at a specific place in your experience that needs to hear something true spoken directly into it. And I want you to carry it with you as we move into this final stretch together, because what I am about to share with you now is the most practical section of everything we have covered tonight. We have talked about who you are. We have talked about what this season has cost you. We have talked about the ancient language that gives your waiting a name and a purpose. We have talked about what is coming and how it will feel when it arrives. Now I want to talk about what you do next, not in the abstract, not in spiritual, in the actual, practical, waking life reality of tomorrow morning and the days that follow it. Because a chosen one who has been given a vision without a corresponding action plan is like a cycle breaker who has been shown the cycle but not given the specific place to stand in order to interrupt it. The understanding matters enormously, but the understanding without the action is incomplete. And you have waited long enough for the incomplete version of things. Tonight I want to give you something whole. There are 3 areas of your life that are about to transform in ways I described in the previous section. And I want to go deeper now into what you actually do in each one. Not what you hope for, not what you pray toward, but what you do, what you decide, what you practice, what you protect. Because transformation of the magnitude that is coming for you does not arrive without your active participation. God moves on your behalf, yes. God positions and prepares and arranges. But the chosen one is never a passive recipient. The chosen one is always a co-creator with heaven in the building of what is coming. And your role in the co-creation begins with the specific, practical actions available to you right now, today, before the breakthrough is fully visible, while you are still standing at the threshold. The first area is relationships, and the practical action here begins with something that may feel counterintuitive. It begins with letting go without forcing the letting go. What I mean by this is that as the natural reorganization of your relational world begins, your job is not to manage it, not to accelerate it, and not to resist it. Your job is to stay honest. Honest with yourself about which connections are giving you life and which ones are quietly draining it. Honest with yourself about which relationships are pulling you toward the person you are becoming and which ones are, through no one's fault necessarily, more comfortable in the version of you that belongs to the previous season. You do not need to make dramatic announcements. You do not need to have difficult conversations that the situation has not yet called for. You simply need to stop pouring enormous energy into connections that are not reciprocating at the level you need, and start giving some of that freed energy to the new connections that are beginning to appear at the edges of your life. This is not abandonment. This is stewardship. And the difference matters. Abandonment walks away from people carelessly. Stewardship recognizes that you have a finite amount of relational energy, and that the way you invest it in this transitional season will determine the quality of the relational community you carry into the next one. There is also something specific you need to protect in this area, and that is your story. During this transitional window, be selective about who you share the full depth of what is happening in you with. Not because secrecy is a virtue, but because seeds need soil before they need an audience. The vision that is clarifying inside you, the purpose that is beginning to crystallize, the dream that is daring to become specific again, after a long season of being held quietly in the interior of your heart. These things need to be planted in fertile ground before they are exposed to the open air of everyone's opinions. Find one or two people, perhaps the new connections that are beginning to appear, perhaps a long-standing relationship of genuine trust, and share with them. But do not cast the vision broadly yet. Let it take root first. Let it grow strong enough to withstand the wind of other people's skepticism before you expose it to that wind. The practical action for the second area, purpose, is this. For the next 7 days, I want you to carry a single question with you. Not a theological question, not a question about your ultimate destiny or your 5-year vision or the grand scope of your calling. A simple, daily, practical question. And the question is this: what is the one thing in front of me today that I can do with the specific gifts I carry that would make a genuine difference to at least one person? That is the question. One thing, one day, one person. Because purpose at its most functional is not a destination, it is a direction. And a direction only becomes clear when you begin moving. The clarity does not precede the movement. The clarity is produced by the movement. And so the most important thing you can do for your sense of purpose right now is not to think harder about it, but to act more specifically within it. The small step that I described in the previous section, the one that will present itself with unusual clarity, it will almost certainly look like the answer to this question. It will look like a way to use what you specifically carry, not what everyone else carries. not the generic version of a calling, but your particular combination of gifts and experience and hard-won wisdom in service of a specific need that is right in front of you. When you see it, do not evaluate it too long. Do not run it through the filter of whether it is big enough or impressive enough, or whether it represents the full scope of your eventual calling. Simply do it. And then ask the question again tomorrow, and do it again. Because purpose is built one faithful, specific, practical action at a time. And the person who does the faithful, small thing every day for 30 days is further along in their purpose than the person who spent those same 30 days planning the perfect version of the large thing. They have not yet begun. There is also something you need to stop doing in this area, and I want to name it directly because it is one of the most common ways that chosen ones inadvertently delay their own forward movement. Stop comparing your pace to the pace of people who are not on your path. The person you keep watching, who seems to be moving faster, who seems to have cracked the code that you are still searching for, who seems to be living in the fullness of something that you are still approaching. They are not on your path. They are on their path, and your path has a timeline, a terrain, and a destination that is entirely specific to you. Comparing your chapter 7 to someone else's chapter 14 is not only mathematically unfair, it is spiritually misleading. It pulls your attention away from the step that is actually in front of you and toward a place that you are not yet standing in, and you cannot take the step that is in front of you while your eyes are fixed on someone else's road. The third area is resources and opportunities, and the practical action here requires you to do something that may feel strange after a long season of striving. It requires you to practice receiving, not just intellectually agreeing that receiving is possible, actually practicing it. Opening your hands, literally if you need the physical metaphor, and releasing the posture of grasping and striving that the scarcity of the previous season trained your body to hold. Because the body remembers the seasons it has lived through, and a body that has lived through a long season of scarcity develops a set of physical and neurological habits that are designed for that scarce environment. Hands that are always slightly clenched, a jaw that carries tension, a nervous system that is always scanning for the next threat to the fragile stability it has been managing. These are not character flaws. They are survival adaptations, and they served you well in the season that required them. But they are not appropriate for the season you are entering, because the season you are entering is a season of flow, of resources finding you rather than you having to chase them down, of opportunities arriving with a quality of rightness that makes them easy to recognize. And a nervous system that is still in survival mode will struggle to recognize those opportunities, not because they are not present, but because survival mode is designed to see threats, not gifts. It is designed to evaluate risk, not to receive blessing. And so the practical work of this period is the deliberate, daily practice of releasing the survival posture and replacing it with what I can only describe as an open hand, a decision repeated daily to believe that what is coming for you and not against you, that the resources belong to you and are not being withheld from you, that the opportunities are genuine invitations and not traps. This is also where the daily practice we discussed earlier becomes most essential. The 7 minutes of stillness each day, the 3-step return, the declaration that you are exactly where you are supposed to be, these are not optional additions for the spiritually ambitious. They are the practical tools of nervous system regulation that make it possible for your body to shift out of the survival frequency and into the receiving frequency. And if you have begun using the genius wave alongside, This practice, you are giving your brain the specific theta and gamma frequency support that makes this shift happen more quickly and more completely than willpower alone can accomplish. Because willpower operates from the conscious mind. But the survival adaptations we are releasing were installed below the level of the conscious mind. And what was installed below the conscious mind requires a below conscious mind tool to address. The sound frequency of the genius wave reaches exactly that level, and the 7 minutes it requires each day is a genuinely small investment for the scale of the return it makes possible. There are also 3 things I need to tell you not to do during this window. Do not make permanent decisions from temporary emotions. The transitional period before a breakthrough is marked by fluctuating emotional states, moments of genuine clarity followed by moments of doubt, and the worst decisions a chosen one can make are the ones made in the valley of the doubt, rather than from the stability of the practice. When you are in a low moment, do not close doors. Do not send messages you cannot retrieve. Do not make agreements that bind your future to your current emotional state. Simply return to the practice. Let the moment pass, and make your decisions from the clearer altitude that the practice reliably produces. Do not shrink in the presence of the opportunity when it arrives. There will be a moment, perhaps soon, where something presents itself that is larger than what you have been accustomed to receiving. And the instinct of a cycle breaker who has spent a long time in a season of limitation is sometimes to make themselves smaller than the opportunity, to qualify and apologize and add disclaimers and perform a kind of preemptive humility that is actually a form of self-protection against the disappointment of wanting something too much. Do not do that. When the opportunity arrives, stand up to your full height. Receive it at the level it is being offered. You were prepared for it. You are ready for it. And you do not need to earn the right to walk through a door that was made for you. And finally, do not stop the practice the moment things begin to improve. This is perhaps the most common and most costly mistake of the breakthrough window. The practice feels most necessary when things are hard, and least necessary when things begin to shift. But the truth is that the practice is what is producing the shift, and stopping it prematurely is like pulling a plant out of the soil the moment the first green shoot appears above the ground. Let it keep growing. Let the roots go deeper. The daily practice of stillness, declaration, gratitude, and the 7-minute frequency reset is not a crisis tool. It is a lifestyle. And the version of you that inhabits the fullness of the next season is the version that has made these practices so deeply habitual that they are no longer something you do, but something you are. You have everything you need to take the next step. Not everything you will ever need, but everything you need for right now. And right now is the only moment in which anything real can ever be done. So take it, the step, the practice, the open hand, the honest conversation, the small and faithful action in the direction of your purpose. Take it today, take it tomorrow, take it the day after that, and watch what the God who has been preparing you for this long does with the faithfulness of a chosen one who finally stopped waiting for the perfect conditions and simply began. We have come a long way together tonight, and I do not say that as a figure of speech. I say it as a genuine acknowledgement of what it takes to stay present for a message of this length and this depth, because there is a part of you, the part that has been hurt enough times to become careful, the part that has hoped before, and felt the particular ache of hope that did not arrive on the timeline it was promised. That part had every reason to close this message early, to decide that it was not for you, to protect itself from the vulnerability of believing again. And yet here you are, at the end, still present, still receiving, still holding on to the thread of something that refuses to let go of you, even when you have, in your most exhausted moments, considered letting go of it. I want to thank you for that. Not in the polite, performative way that fills the space between things that actually matter. I want to thank you sincerely from the deepest place of this message for showing up tonight, for not closing the tab, for not putting the phone down, for letting these words find the places in you that needed to be found. Because the part of you that stayed, the part that kept listening, even when the content got difficult, even when it named things you had been keeping quiet, even when it asked you to sit with a pain that you have been carefully managing from a distance, that part of you is the most courageous part. And courage in a chosen one is never loud. It is rarely dramatic. It is most often simply the quiet decision to still be present when every tired and wounded part of you had reasonable grounds for departure. You did not leave, and that matters more than you know. I also want you to know something that is true right now, in this moment, as you receive these final words. You are not alone in this room. I know that the physical space you are in may be quiet. I know that the people in your immediate world may not fully understand the specific weight of what you carry or the specific nature of what you are reaching toward. I know that the loneliness of a chosen season can make the world feel very small, and the distance between your interior experience and anyone else's understanding feel very large. But I want you to hear this clearly. All across the world right now, in time zones you will never visit, in languages you do not speak, in circumstances that look very different from yours on the surface, but that carry the exact same interior texture, other chosen ones are receiving this same message. Other people who have been in their own version of the wilderness, their own version of the long wait, their own version of the midnight hour, are sitting with these same words and feeling the same recognition that you felt when the message first began to name what you have been living through. You are part of a community that spans the globe and crosses every boundary that the world uses to divide people from each other. A community defined not by geography or language or denomination or background, but by the specific and irreplaceable quality of being someone who was made for more, who has always known it, and who has paid the real and unglamorous price of holding on to that knowing through seasons that gave very little visible evidence that the knowing was justified. That community is real. And tonight, every one of them is walking into this message alongside you. You are surrounded by people you cannot see, but who are genuinely with you. And the God who gathered all of you to this same message, at this same moment, across all of those distances and differences, is not doing it by accident. He is doing it because chosen ones need to know they are not alone. And tonight, you are not alone. Now I want to give you one final exercise. And I want you to take it seriously, not as a symbolic gesture, but as a real and intentional act of release. Because you cannot carry everything that the previous season put on you into the next one. Some of it needs to be set down here, at the threshold. Before you step through, I want you to close your eyes for a moment if you are able. And I want you to imagine every heavy thing you have been carrying, not in the abstract. Give each one a specific shape, a specific weight, a specific texture. The disappointment that settled into your chest and has been living there so long, you have almost forgotten what it feels like to breathe without it. The fear that the best of your life has already happened, and what remains is simply the management of diminishing returns. The quiet shame of the dreams that did not arrive on the timeline that felt reasonable. The grief of the relationships that did not survive the season. The exhaustion of being the one who holds things together when no one is watching. and no one is asking how you are doing while you do it. Give each one a shape. Feel the weight of it in your hands. And now I want you to set it down. Right here, the threshold where you are standing. Not because the pain was not real. Not because the cost was not genuine. But because you are stepping into a season that requires your hands to be free. And you cannot receive with hands that are full of what you have been carrying. Set it down, all of it. The weight of the years. The accumulated evidence of the long wait. The story that the hard season tried to write about who you are and what you deserve. Set it down at the threshold and leave it there. Because what is on the other side of this threshold was designed for the version of you that travels light, and the version of you that has been in the wilderness long enough to know that it cannot carry everything into the promised place. That version of you is wise enough to leave what needs to be left behind. You are stepping through right now, not tomorrow, not when the circumstances confirm it, not when the feelings catch up to the decision. Right now, in this moment, with these words as witness, you are stepping through the threshold from the season of waiting into the season of receiving. And the step does not require perfection. It does not require complete certainty. It does not require that every question has been answered or that every wound has been fully healed. It only requires your willingness, and your willingness has been present in every moment of this message. That willingness is the step. Now, I want to speak to something practical before we close, because this message, the one you have just spent this time inside of, took something to create. Time, care, research, the kind of sustained attention to the specific needs of a specific community that does not happen quickly or casually. And if these words have given you something real tonight, if they have named what needed to be named and offered what needed to be offered, I want to ask you to do something with that. Not for me. I want to be clear about that. What I am about to ask, I am asking for the chosen one who is going to wake up tomorrow morning in their own version of this wilderness, in their own version of the midnight hour, in their own version of the long wait, who needs to find this message and who will not find it unless you help it travel. Like this video. It takes 1 second and it tells the algorithm that this content matters, that it is worth showing to more people, that the chosen ones who need it should be able to find it. Subscribe to this channel so that the next message can find you when you need it, and so that every new message has a community large enough to receive it and carry it forward. Share this video with one person, just one. The person who came to mind somewhere in the middle of this message, the one you thought of when a particular part of the content named something you recognized from their life, as well as your own. Send it to them, not with a long explanation. Just send it and let the message speak for itself. And if this message has genuinely changed something in you tonight, if it has given you a framework, a language, a practice, or a permission that you did not have before you pressed play, I want to invite you to consider supporting this channel through a donation. The link is available in the pinned comment below. Whatever amount reflects the value of what you receive tonight is the right amount. And if you are not in a position to give financially right now, that is completely understood and completely honored. Your presence here, your engagement, your willingness to share and subscribe, those are forms of contribution that carry real weight. Every action you take in support of this message is an act of generosity toward every chosen one who has not yet found it. And finally, I want to mention one more time, gently and without pressure, something that I shared earlier in this message. If the genius wave found you somewhere in the middle of tonight and something in you recognized it as a yes, it is waiting for you in the pinned comment below. The The 7-minute daily practice we talked about, the practice of stillness and declaration and gratitude, it is a powerful foundation on its own. But if you want to give your brain the specific frequency support that Dr. James Rivers spent more than 30 years developing, the tool is there. Through the link in the pinned comment, at $39 with a full 90-day money-back guarantee. If it is a yes for you, beloved, do not let the moment pass. The link will be there, and so will the guarantee. And so will the version of you that is ready to operate at the frequency you were designed for. You came into this message as one version of yourself. You are leaving it as something slightly different, something slightly more named, something slightly more recognized, something slightly more ready. And that difference, however quiet it feels right now, is the beginning of everything that is coming. Go forward, Psych Breaker. The world is waiting for what only you can bring. There is one more thing I want to leave with you before you go. Not information, not instruction, not another concept to carry, or another practice to begin. Just this: you were seen before you were born. Before the first difficult morning of this season. Before the first door that closed. Before the first prayer that seemed to go unanswered. Before the first night that was too long and the first silence that was too heavy. Before any of it, you were seen fully, completely, without condition, and without limit. Seen in the precise and particular way that only the one who made you is capable of seeing you. Not the performed version of you. Not the managed version. Not the version that holds it together in public and grieves in private. The real you. Every room of you. Every sealed door and every quiet hope and every half-surrendered dream and every stubborn thread of faith that refused to break even when everything around it did. That version of you was seen, and it was called good. It was called chosen. It was called exactly right for the time and the purpose for which it was made. You carry something this world needs, not a generic something, a specific, irreplaceable, particular something that exists nowhere else in all of creation, except in the singular combination of everything that you are, and the world will receive it. Not because you forced it, not because you performed your way to deserving it, but because the appointed time has a way of making space for exactly what was always meant to fill it. Walk gently into the days ahead, beloved. Walk with your hands open. Walk with your eyes up. Walk knowing that the God who brought you through the wilderness has never once lost sight of the promised place He was walking you toward. And walk knowing this, which is the truest thing I can say to you at the end of this message and at the beginning of Comes Next. You are not almost there. You are already arriving. Go in peace. Go in the fullness of what you carry. And go knowing that heaven itself is leaning forward to watch what you do next. You are loved completely, without reservation, without condition, without end. That is all. That is enough. That is everything.